Carrie White was born in the small town of Chamberlain, Maine, in 1963. Her mother, Margaret White, was a fanatically religious woman who saw her daughter as the embodiment of sin and corruption. She kept Carrie in complete isolation from the world. No friends, no entertainment, only prayers, the Bible, and strict punishments. The house was filled with crosses, icons, and religious books. Margaret often locked her daughter in a dark closet under the stairs, forcing her to pray for hours on end for the slightest real or imagined offense. Carrie grew up pale, thin, with acne-covered skin and strange clothing, old dresses her mother sewed herself, without any fashionable elements or color. From early childhood, Carrie exhibited unusual abilities. At 3 years old, during one of their arguments when her mother nearly strangled her, stones rained down around the house, like a hail of granite crashing onto the roof and walls. Margaret called it a demonic manifestation and tightened her control, praying even more furiously. Carrie learned to hide her powers, but they built up inside her like a storm in a bottled A.T. Bates High School. Carrie became an outcast from the very first day. Classmates noticed her clumsiness, odd way of speaking, lack of makeup, and unfashionable clothes. They whispered taunts, slipped insulting notes into her locker, shoved her in the hallways. She sat alone in the cafeteria, ate quickly, and left. No one came near her. Everyone knew it was better not to associate with her to avoid becoming the next target for mockery. Everything changed in her junior year after gym class. Carrie got her first period. She had no idea what was happening. Her mother had never spoken about such things, considering them filthy and sinful. Carrie panicked in the shower as blood ran down her legs. She screamed in fear and pain. Instead of helping, the girls around her started laughing. They threw tampons and pads at her, shouted insults, forcing her to writhe on the wet floor. Blood mixed with water, swirling down the drain. The teacher, Miss Desjardins, finally intervened, dispersed the crowd, and took Carrie to the nurse's office. She harshly punished the culprits, extra training sessions, and exclusion from events. But the punishment only fueled their resentment. Chris Hargensen, the leader of the bullies, refused to comply and was barred from the prom. She swore revenge. Together with her boyfriend Billy Nolan and their group, they devised a cruel plan. They bought pig's blood from a slaughterhouse and hid a bucket above the stage in the gym where the prom would take place. Everything was calculated perfectly. Meanwhile, Sue Snell, one of the girls who had joined in the shower harassment, felt guilty. She convinced her popular football player boyfriend, Tommy Ross, to invite Carrie to the prom. Tommy hesitated at first but agreed. When he approached Carrie in the hallway and asked her, she initially thought it was another prank, but he insisted and seemed sincere. Trembling, Carrie accepted. It was the first time anyone had looked at her without contempt. At home, Margaret flew into a rage. She screamed about sin, the devil, and how the prom was a trap for the soul. For the first time, Carrie dared to resist. Her power had grown. She could move objects with her mind, stop her mother without touching her. Margaret backed down but warned that this was the end. Carrie secretly sewed a dress, simple but beautiful, pink. She taught herself makeup from old magazines she hid under her mattress. Prom night felt like a miracle to her. Tommy was gentle. They danced and laughed. Carrie felt normal, beautiful, accepted for the first time. The crowd applauded. Then they announced the prom king and queen, Carrie and Tommy. They stepped onto the stage under flashing lights, smiling. At that moment, the bucket fell from above. Pig's blood poured over Carrie, soaking her dress, hair, and face. Tommy was splattered too. The hall froze for a second. Then laughter erupted. First nervous, then loud and hysterical. Carrie stood motionless, feeling the blood drip down her cheeks, every eye staring at her with mockery. Everything that had built up over the years, humiliation, pain, loneliness, exploded inside her. The gym doors slammed shut on their own, locks jamming. The lights flickered and went out. Candles on the tables flared brighter, curtains caught fire. Carrie raised her hands, and the beams began to crack and collapse. People screamed, rushed to the exits, but the doors wouldn't budge. Light fixtures exploded, shards flying everywhere. Flames spread instantly. Carrie walked through the chaos, her eyes glowing white. With her gaze, she flipped cars, exploded gas stations, and brought houses crashing down. The town of Chamberlain turned into hell. Fires raged through the streets, sirens wailed, but no one could get close. Carrie continued onward, sowing destruction. Hundreds died that night: classmates, teachers, parents, random passers-by. Police tried to stop her, but bullets ricocheted, cars soared into the air. Finally, Carrie reached home. Margaret waited with a knife in her hands, whispering prayers. She lunged at her daughter, calling her the devil. Carrie stopped her. Her mother's heart seized from terror and pain. The house trembled, walls cracked, the roof collapsed, burying them both under the rubble. By morning, Chamberlain lay in ruins. Smoke drifted over the wreckage of the school, streets, and homes. Survivors spoke of a girl in a blood-soaked dress who moved things with her mind, summoned fire and death. Officially, it was blamed on a gas explosion and chain reaction fires. But those who had seen it knew the truth. Years passed. The town slowly rebuilt, but the memory of that night never died. People avoided mentioning Carrie aloud, but her name was whispered in the dark. Some said she hadn't truly died, that such power couldn't simply vanish. In the old White House, never fully demolished, shadows were sometimes seen. Children avoided the place, telling each other that if you stood there at night and said her name 3 times, blood would rain from the sky again. In the 1980s, a girl named Rachel was born in Chamberlain. Her mother was one of the survivors who had been in the gym and witnessed the beginning. Rachel grew up hearing stories of that night, plagued by nightmares of a girl in a pink dress. When she turned 16, she began to feel strange things. Objects moved around her when she was angry. Glasses fell, doors slammed, light bulbs burst. Her mother noticed and panicked. She told her daughter everything about Carrie, the blood, the destruction. Rachel was terrified, but the power was already awakening. One day at school, history repeated itself. Rachel became the target of mockery for her strangeness, for her mother going crazy after that night. She was pushed, insulted, notes slipped into her locker. One day after class in the locker room, they dumped paint over her, shouting the same words once directed at Carrie. Rachel stood trembling, feeling the familiar storm rising inside. She didn't wait for a prom. She didn't endure. That same evening, after everyone had gone home, Rachel stepped outside. Her eyes ignited with the same white light. She raised her hand, and streetlights bent like straw. Cars lifted into the air, houses groaned. The town heard sirens again, but this time, no one could stop her in time. Rachel walked down Main Street, leaving a trail of fire and debris behind her. She didn't want to kill everyone. She wanted them to feel what Carrie had felt, to understand what it was like to be broken, humiliated, alone. But rage doesn't listen to reason. It devours. When it was over, Chamberlain lay in ruins once more. Rachel vanished. No body was ever found. Some said she walked into the woods. Others claimed she dissolved into the air like a ghost. And in the old White House, in that same closet where Carrie once prayed, a quiet whispering is sometimes heard. As if 2 girls, separated by time, continue the same prayer of revenge, of peace, of finally being heard. And every time, in some town somewhere, someone becomes an outcast, is laughed at, is pushed to the edge, people involuntarily remember Chamberlain. Because the story never ends. It waits for the next victim, and the next rage. Decades later, in the quiet aftermath of yet another reconstruction, strange reports began surfacing from distant places. Girls with unexplained abilities, sudden outbursts of force that shattered windows or bent metal, always linked back to bullying, isolation, religious fervor, or buried trauma. No one could prove a direct connection, but the pattern echoed, a suppressed gift awakening under cruelty, then exploding outward. Some researchers whispered of a Carrie effect, a psychic residue lingering in the bloodlines or the very soil of Maine. Others dismissed it as coincidence. But in the shadows of small towns across America, mothers still locked doors tighter, and children still avoided certain names at night. The rage, it seemed, had not died with Carrie or Rachel. It had simply waited, patient and invisible, ready to rise again whenever the world proved it hadn't learned its lesson.